Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. Really, it started almost been 7 years ago now. I was looking for a job and had reached out to someone by the name of Ken Fick. He was running a website around FP&A and doing consulting. He's running his own business. And I offered him, I said, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I'll give you a Starbucks gift card for the time. And he goes, I'm happy to give you 30 minutes of my time. He's like, I don't want a gift card. I want you to write an article for my website. And I remember thinking, well, I'm terrible at writing, but sure, I'll write the article. And I wrote one, and he's like, hey, if you write me one a month, he offered me, like, I'll give you a little bit of money to do that. So I did a few and found one of them I shared on LinkedIn, did quite well, and I kind of enjoyed it. And so from there, I started doing a few more things on LinkedIn as I was looking for a job. Yeah, nothing serious. And then there's a group run by FP&A Trends, has about 30,000 FP&A followers on LinkedIn. And I joined that group, and they were looking for someone to help manage the conversations periodically. So I did that. That led to being part of a few webinars. And then 2 years back, I had started a website around reviews for Excel, like writing reviews around, hey, what are the best sites to learn about Power Query or just different things in Excel? And that led to, so a few more things and continue to build a following. Probably had 4,000 people, nothing real consistent. And then about a year and a half ago, maybe a little more, 2 years ago, I was again looking for some work. And I started writing about some software tools. And because I was interviewing with a few of them, and that led to people asking me to demo tools. And so I started doing more and more about tools. And about 13, 14 months ago, all in about a 3-week period, someone reached out to me and said, hey, I have some contract work. Would you like to do that? And I'm like, I can just do that part-time. Then another person reached out to me and, hey, I started my own training business. I need someone to build my Excel courses. I'm not good at Excel. I'll do the other trading. And I'm like, sure, why not? And then in a 1-week period, I got 2 job offers and a third vendor that wanted to do a bunch of collaborations with me. And so I went to my wife. I'm like, hey, I think I can turn this into a business. She looked at me like I was crazy, as she probably should have, and kind of like, let's slow this down. I'm not sure this would work. And, we talked about it. About 6 weeks later, it would have been last February, actually, about just over a year ago, she goes, one morning, she's like, yeah, you can quit your job. You can start the business if you want. I'm like, you sure? So I'm going to put in my notice today and put in my notice and started the business. That's kind of the backstory to it. And along the way, one day I just used the hashtag the FP&A Guy, and it stuck. And I decided to build a brand around it. No question it's possible. You're seeing more and more people come through the role of CFO. One of the software vendors out there, I think it was, it's on LinkedIn, DataRails wrote an article, I think it was DataRails, it may have been another, but one of the tools kind of did a study showing more and more CFOs today are coming through FP&A versus traditionally the vast majority came through controllership. Governance used to be kind of key. It was all about keeping people out of trouble, making sure the books were right. Today, the modern CFO is much more about data and commercials and really, helping create value for the business. And because FP&A has holistic, they're one of the few organizations that's cross-functional that has a holistic view of the entire business and works with every part of it. They're well-positioned. At the same time, you need more as a general rule than just FP&A experience. You need to be well-rounded in finance. As one person I really like, Jeff Marks, their company uses something they call the finance passport. He goes, if you want to be a CFO, you kind of need to be a finance specialist, which is the idea is you got, not specialist, I mean an athlete, where you do multiple different things. You got to punch different parts of that passport. Doesn't mean you have to be in all those roles, but you need projects that show you can demonstrate and lead a group that manages those things, from audit to tax to accounting to FP&A to treasury. Yeah, so starting on the communication side, I think the biggest thing is practice. One person who speaks a lot about it on LinkedIn and is a fabulous presenter is Carl Seidman. He talks about, all the practice he's put in. From, he used to be part of a comedy group. He did Toastmasters. He's now part of a national speaking club. He even had a voice coach at one. All right, he made a complete commitment that I'm going to learn to be able to command a room. And he put in hundreds of hours. So communication, whether it's written, whether it's verbal, whatever method it may be, for me, it really comes down to deliberate practice to get good at it. But I think there's a couple things that go into being strategic. right? I mean, first you got to know the business. For a long time, FP&A was viewed as what I call FP&R, financial planning and reporting. Here's this 100-page deck that nobody read that ended up in the round file basket. And now you're seeing much more. It's about knowing the business, discussing commercials. I remember one time, knowing I'd really made an impact in the business when I was sitting in a meeting with our product team and we were working for some new pricing. And they reached over to me and said, okay, well, what should the price be? And my response was, I try to look at it strategically. Here's what it needs to be from a margin perspective. But ultimately, setting the price should be the product, the marketing, and the sales team. Finance, I'll give input, and I gave my thoughts, but you guys need to decide what can the market bear here. And so that was a strategic discussion. And I realized, okay, we got to the point where I have that seat at the table and we're working together. And the only way that happened was I took the time to deeply learn the business.
Yeah.
That's the biggest advice I can give on that one is you want to be involved in the strategic discussions. Make sure two things. One, that you've learned the business, and two, that you're providing value and support to the leaders of your organizations. You're not focusing on finance needs, you're focusing on business needs. At the end of the day, whether it's finance, FP&A, wherever it might be, if you want to be a senior leader, you have to demonstrate leadership, right? That can be done in different ways, right? There's a manager and there's a leader. I've been in roles where I've had a manager, but, I even had my CFO tell me, basically, you're the leader of this group right now, even though you have a manager.
Yeah.
And in time, I ended up becoming the manager as well. So, demonstrating leadership comes from working to take control of situations and being proactive. And I don't mean by control of going in and saying, hey, I'm in charge, I'm going to run this, but showing that you can help guide and move it forward and influence it, regardless of whether you're the one officially in charge. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. Volunteering for assignments is always a great way when you don't have a leadership experience. Remember, I had someone on my podcast, John Loudy, who's now a CFO. And remember, he wanted to get some leadership experience, and there just wasn't enough people on the team. And so he proposed a program to bring in some college interns for the summer, and he managed the program and managed the interns, and it was low cost, high value. And it gave him some really good leadership. And then when a position came up to manage a team, he ended up getting the position. And so sometimes you need to be creative and think of different ways, even outside of work. Like school, volunteer to be part of different leadership organizations during school. There's a lot of ways you can demonstrate that. A 100%. I mean, the reality is more CFOs are putting the analytics and the data teams under them. My last job, I had got a new CFO. One of the very first things he did was stick analytics under him and get involved in the system side. They're saying, hey, how can we move that? We were working on a CFO transformation, bringing in CPQ, configure, procure, quote tools. And he was immediately like, how do we move this forward? How do we get this done quicker? He brought in a new person to manage the analytics and the operations. And you can see very data focused. So you're seeing a big push by CFOs because, what's the organization, one of the few that sees the data across the entire business? It's finance. And often they should be the one calculating those metrics so they're standard. A huge problem you have today is if you go to a business, and I dealt with this a lot in my last role, where I was helping standardize what all our definitions for metrics were. I go to marketing and how do you define churn? Well, we're doing it this way. Finance, we're doing this way. Go over to the sales ops person and they're doing it that way. And CFO's like, I want to see it this way. And every number's different. And so that's the worst place to be in for a leader is to sit in a meeting and you spend the first 45 minutes arguing over the data and how it should be defined. And so, the more a CFO can help with that transformation and help push to ensure that systems speak together, that data is standardized, the better. It's really kind of a golden age of software tools. I've talked to, in the last year, probably 60 CEOs. I've demoed, since I started doing this in the last, I don't know, 14 months, 60, 70 tools. I talk to a CEO every week around someone who's built a software tool.
Mhm.
So the opportunity to use a tool is better than ever. And despite that, there's still times that Excel or Google Sheets, depending on the size of the business and the complexity, may make sense.
Mhm.
But as companies start to scale, you deal with some real challenges: collaboration, security, data integration, that a tool such as a spreadsheet can't solve very well because they're not an enterprise platform.
Mhm.
And so, an FP&A tool is great because it can help with collaboration. It can help with, bringing in all that data and helping a business automate a lot of things. The reality is most finance people spend, I've seen anywhere from 50 to 70% of their time on non-value add activities,
Yeah.
data prep, those type of things that are not what they want to be doing and don't help them to be strategic and be a senior leader, but have to be done.
Mhm.
So tools will continue to play a big role in making it so that you don't have to spend as much time on the non-value add activities, and you can focus on gaining insight out of the data. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, one, learn the business. So I say there's probably three things: learn the business.
Mhm.
Two, add value to the senior leaders. Make sure you're meeting their needs. And the third is, be willing to speak up and speak about more than just financial issues. Speak up about strategic things in the business. Don't take over conversations, but make sure you can add value and your voice can be heard, because people will notice that. And when you start adding value, then more opportunities become open to you, and your career can grow from there.